We are privileged to have Anna Chandy, our guest speaker this afternoon. Now I would like to request Ms. Meenal Jain, our chairperson, to accompany our esteemed speaker to the dais, please. Let me introduce our speaker for today. She's a columnist, author, counselor, speaker, mentor, and coach to senior leaders, executives, and individuals from diverse walks of life. Anna traces her own personal growth from a submissive woman to the self-assured counselor, founder, and chairperson of Live, Love, Laugh Foundation, set up by Deepika Padukone. She's the first certified trainer in transactional analyst from India. Anna has been trained in mind, body work, and also certified in neuro-linguistic programming and art theory. Anna has volunteered for 14 years with Vishwas Society for Mental Health. During her tenure, she worked with survivors of Gujarat earthquake and victims of the tsunami in Sri Lanka. She serves on the board of advisors of Oak Ridge International School, Bangalore. We are here to understand the battle arising in our minds and to explore deep self-introspection, reflection, and learning. I request Ms. Meenal Jain to welcome Ms. Anna Chandy. Thank you. I now invite Ms. Meenal Jain, our chairperson, to give her opening remarks.
Good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, everybody. And now I appreciate the silence. Sometimes all of us come across silly but funny confusions on a lighter note. Like, can we cry underwater? Do fishes ever get thirsty? Why doesn't glue stick to a bottle? In a movie theater, which armrest is yours? And so on and so forth. Ladies, I welcome you all to this event to explore the unexplored, to understand about our worst enemy and best friend living between our 2 ears. We have with us Anna Chandy, a thought leader on mental health, a great human being. She has helped counsel numerous people with her own style of counseling and mentoring. Anna, it's our privilege to have you amongst with us. All other chapters are after her life to come and give a talk there. They say, we are all mostly a sum of together of our thoughts added and subtracted, continuously to our dear friend, our mind. With Anna, we will walk today on a road journey lined up with invisible mirrors, where we all see various reflections and points of reference in our daily lives. To conclude, I would say, no pressures, no diamonds. Let us all remember, not everything starts with perfection. Every diamond started their journey as a coal. Thank you so much. Anna, I welcome you to take it forward.
Good evening. It's really such a wonderful sight for my eye to see so many women together. And it gives me great pleasure to be here with all of you. And thank you, Minal. I don't know if you know that she had actually booked and been calling from last year. And I had committed that I would come this year, and so here I am. And thank you, ladies, for all of you for being here, because I think it's important that all of us as women understand and work together with some of these things. So let me start. And when you look at this image, how many of you relate to it? All of you relate to it. And this, how many of us go through a conflict or a battle in our minds? All of us. Okay, so my particular battle, which was, should I remain silent or should I speak up? Should I remain silent or should I speak up? I heard what all of you said, or what I was introduced as, that I'm a thought leader, I'm a counselor, I'm a speaker. I never thought I would get here. Each time I address an audience, I start with thinking to myself, boy, this has been a journey. And the battle that I talked about, should I speak up or should I remain silent, was the battle that I fought in my own head, and the battle many of us fight, both men and women, and the theme being silence or speak up. It took me 22 years of therapy to finally speak up. I'm going to start by sharing a bit of my story with you, which is my history, and I share because I think it's important for me to share with you when I stand here that my life started with a very dark lens. Life looked black, life looked bleak, I was afraid, I felt inadequate, and there was nothing for me to look forward to. The lens has changed. I wake up each morning looking forward. Now, why was that a battle for me? I am a child of a very dysfunctional relationship, and in my growing years, the volatility of the dysfunctionality in the relationship, it was so volatile and so potent that not once any adult asked me, "Are you okay?" And was I okay? No, I was not. I was a psychological mess. An absolute psychological mess. And today when I hear that I'm a good therapist, yes, I have a lot of qualifications, but I believe that I'm a good therapist because I relate to pain, to emotional pain. I understand pain, and I smell pain even when I meet people socially. I see through the veneer of the smile. All of us have some sort of pain, or we struggle, and we try to hide it, and we smile. So this was the battle in my mind, and that is how I began my journey. When I began as a counselor, I shared this afternoon at lunchtime, I was no different from anybody else. I had got married as expected. As soon as you get that certification saying you've got your qualifications, you get married. And 6 months later, my husband's brother attempted suicide. My husband was the good son who decided that he'll bring his brother, and the brother would live with us. I'm 23 years old. I may have studied psychology in college, but those are two separate things. And that's how I began my journey in counseling. But once I began my journey in counseling and started discovering aspects of myself, I really began to enjoy my journey. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about, some of us who have this battle, silence or speak up. We human beings are like pressure cookers. What does that mean? What happens to food when you cook it in a pressure cooker? You put the weight, put the lid on, and you keep cooking and you cook and you cook. Finally, too much pressure inside, the weight flies off, the lid flies off, and all the content is splattered all over. And that's what we human beings are similar to. If we don't periodically vent or ventilate or express what's going on inside, then we become splattered all over and end up a psychological mess. Now when I say that, that doesn't mean that you have to call everybody and share your story. No, that's separate. What I'm saying is that we need that space. We first need to acknowledge that space, that we need a space to vent and articulate some of the stuff that's going on inside us. Now, how do we know we are all being cooked? You look at all of us and do we look like we are being cooked? Well, here are some of the symptoms that you start seeing. Behaviorally, you start noticing you don't want to go out anymore. You're not getting things run right, whether you're at college or at school. You withdraw from close friends and family. They don't seem so interesting. Even sharing family stories or gossiping or bitching about each other doesn't seem so exciting and interesting anymore. You start relying on alcohol or sedatives. Now, when we say alcohol or sedatives, alcohol just doesn't have to be pure alcohol, okay, which means it's not just the beers, the brandies, the rums, the vodkas, the wines. It can be even things like people swigging cough syrup. There are people who swig cough syrup. There are people who keep taking sleeping pills which are not calibrated and monitored. Any form of substance that you take in excess is not okay. Simply not okay. The other thing that happens to us is we don't enjoy doing the things we are normally doing. Suppose we had a hobby, and if we're being cooked and if there's pressure building inside, after some time, the hobby also becomes not interesting and we're unable to concentrate. So behaviorally, these are some of the things that we see. Physical. I feel tired all the time. I feel sick and run down. Constant headaches and muscle pains. I have that churning in my stomach, something we all feel when we are scared. Suppose we're going to do something new, when we're anxious. Sleep problems. Now, sleep problems is not that you have insomnia and you can't sleep. You may be sleeping excessively. Or you may be having what we call intermittent sleep. That is, you sleep and wake up. So when you wake up in the morning, you do not wake up feeling rested. And then we have change of appetite. By that, it means that we want to eat more or we want to eat less, or we are drawn to certain particular tastes. And then you have significant weight gain or weight loss. Now, these are some of the physical symptoms that we see. Some of the feelings. We're overwhelmed, we're guilty. We feel guilty for everything. All of us, it seems almost like we have a voice in our head then telling us, you're no good, you're useless, you're unworthy. What's the point of all of you doing this? Nobody loves you. You can hear that voice in your head. And it's like a parrot is constantly living in your head. Then you lack confidence, you're unhappy. People get irritated with you, even your family members, because you never make a decision. You will not let somebody else make a decision, neither will you make the decision. You feel disappointed, you feel miserable, and you feel sad. These are, as I said, some of the thoughts. I'm a failure, it's my fault. Nobody loves me, I'm worthless, life is not living, people would be better off without me. Now, you see so many of these things and you say, hey, I don't have any of these things, so I'm fine. Now let me alert you. if you have any of the three from any of the 4 buckets and they persist for over 2 to 3 weeks, please flag it, because it means that you need to take professional support. The journey of overcooking has begun. Okay? So you don't need to have all these. This is not a checklist like that. If you have 3 of any for over 2 weeks, it's a flag saying, I need something. Something's going on in me. Now, this is why this is important. Mental health, like physical health, has conditions, and we move. And we move from a continuum to severity or severe impairment. Now, all of us use the word stress all the time. Stress as a word or stress is not bad. Stress, we need a certain amount of stress to function. However, when the stress has started becoming too much, that's when we start reacting, which means stress has moved on to becoming distress. What is the difference between reaction and responding? Okay. Yeah? Excellent. Now, it happens to all of us. Okay? We can take a typical family situation. We are all there. We're all these capable women, yet we run our homes, right? Husband, child, somebody can say, where are my shoes? Now, what do most of us, if we are in a reaction, what would we say? You're always like this, why the hell do you ask me? Am I your keeper? If it's a response, how would we answer? What would you say if you're responding? Reaction, you're all smiling. So what would be? What would a response be? I don't know where your shoes are. Would you like to look for it? When we say, I'm not your maid, I'm not your secretary, all that is a reaction. Okay? So there's a huge difference between reaction and response. Also, when we are reactive, others experience us as edgy. We're snappy. We snap. We snap for silly things. It's really not important. And that's not because of them, but it's because something is going on inside of me and I can't understand because I'm not really aware. Now, when I'm on the continuum and I am reacting continuously and I'm not doing anything, then I become psychologically injured. In spite of that, if I don't take help, then is when I have a clinical disorder. Now, so here's something I want to share with you because we all use this in common day-to-day language. A lot of you have teenage children, a lot of you have grown-up children, a lot of you have young children, and we all use this word depressed. I'm depressed, you'll hear people say. I'm depressed means, in day-to-day English, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling low, or I'm feeling disappointed. And where do you think that fits? in the reacting. Because when you're in impairment or when you've been injured, you don't say that. People who are injured or they have reached the disease of depression, they will never come and tell you, I'm depressed. They will share other things with you. Is this making sense? So, when somebody says, I'm depressed, it's okay to say, so I understand that you're feeling sad. Or can you share? Very important for us to understand this, because now when we are in the reactive stage, who do we first phone up? Close friends, okay? Mother, okay? Some are lucky to call the husbands. Yeah? Now, absolutely no problem to call your friend or your husband or whoever you need to. But remember one thing. They are part of the issue. So they will never know the whole picture. Okay? And therefore, you actually don't get help. Because they will give you their solution, which is from their space. And all of us also find it difficult to share some stuff about ourselves. It's not so easy. While we like to believe, and I'm 54 years old, so I can tell you this. I always tell a lot of clients when they tell me about this soulmate, and I'll say, listen, buddy, that's a fantasy. Let's live on earth. This poor man, he cannot be a soulmate, because if he has to manage multiple needs, he can't. He's not capable. He's not made like that. There will be some stuff in him that is non-soulmate. So these are fantasies. I also like those fantasies. I like to watch these romantic movies and then just sit and, roll my eyes and think, this is how the world is. But we have to come back to the earth. So that's what happens when we are starting to react. Okay? The importance in this is, when I take you to the next slide and I tell you the story, then you will understand why even those of us who hear somebody's narrative about their struggle, and we feel so good when we help them with our suggestions, believe me, you cannot really help them. Because in the end, they need professional help. Now, I'm not marketing myself. That's not what I'm saying. You need professional help because professionals are taught how to facilitate this, which means when somebody jumps into the well, in order to save them, you don't dive in there yourself. You stay out and you put the rope in. So that's what it is about. So again, I want to kind of demystify what counseling is. I hear people saying, oh, so you'll give me advice. No, I don't give you advice. I help you seek your problems. So the reason why, when we are reacting and we only share with people who do not have professional skills, we are going to move into injury. And what does injury mean? Injury means, especially in today's world, we are going to have mental health issues. Okay? Now, this is so important. Our mental health is so integral to our daily lives and to our daily function. Yet, What do we associate mental health with? Okay? People who really have a problem with mental health feel like this. And they will tell you that a lot of them, when they try to explain, they will say, it's like I'm immersed in a cloud and I'm not able to actually relate to the person directly. It's like everything is being filtered. So the things seem very hazy for them. They don't feel like smiling. They can sit in this room with this, all of us here, and still feel terribly lonely. Or they have bodily pains. Now, can they share this? No. Why? Because any form of emotional distress is associated with, first we exclude them. What do we say? Pagal hai. They're not mad. Not at all. And that's a stereotype that movies have done. Because in movies, people with mental health issues are violent, they're aggressive, they talk rubbish. No, that's 3%. 93% are like you and me sitting like this with issues and we don't talk about it. So we exclude them. So can they share? No. There's a stigma with it. Anything to do with the mind and our emotions is associated with stigma. There's shame and there's humiliation. I feel very, very sad when somebody comes to see me with some issue. The first thing they say is that when they finally had the guts to ask for help to their family members, instead of getting them help, the family is trying to cover it up. And why are they doing that? Because of the shame and stigma. Then what do the family do? Next thing they do, be positive, be positive. That makes them feel even worse than they are. Okay? Then what do they do? Families then say, why do you need to take help? Tell me, I'll solve your problem. How will you do it? A, you're not able to assess it. Secondly, you don't have the skills and competence for it. It is so sad. It's so very sad. Because of the shame and stigma, it takes so much guts in people to actually come and share. Now, all of you are FICCI, and I understand, and I just realized today I've learned a lot. All of you are entrepreneurs, and all of you are women, women running small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large business. Do you know that mental health is the second largest cause of economic loss? And yet, it is ignored. Do you know in the health budget, in the national health budget, it's given 0.02%. Now, why is it important to all of us in this country? Because India is a young country. The average age of our 1.3 billion Indians is 31.8 years. And mental health issues strike the young. So what are we talking about? If you go to doctors today and you say, I have backache, and they do checkups, after some time they will say, go for counseling. Because, if you have stress, cardio issues, if you have diabetes, most of the illnesses today are associated with the mind. And yet, mental health is ignored. Any questions to this? Do you understand this? Now, by 2025 precisely, WHO has said that India will lose 2.2 trillion because of mental health issues, and depression by 2020 is going to be an epidemic. It's very, very frightening. So we all think anybody who's depressed is actually going to be sitting at home, lying in bed and not working. Here is something called high functioning depression. What is high functioning depression? They cannot stop working. What we call workaholics. Because if you remove that from them, they can't function, they can't survive, they can't live. Is it familiar to some of us? Some of the best minds in the world are people who've had depression and who survived depression. And then there's what is called chronic depression, where they are actually continuously for 2-3 years, they feel depressed and people begin to recognize. So this is what we call dysthymia. So there was a question on anxiety. Again, anxiety on its own is not, there's nothing wrong. We need it. We need to feel anxious to help us get to the airport on time. We need to feel anxious to study for an exam. We need to feel anxious because we have to complete our balance sheet to pay taxes. That's normal. But when the anxiety increases and I am experiencing like I'm having a heart attack and I'm rushed to the hospital and they actually do the ECG and they see no change, they will tell you that's a panic attack. It's as they can actually feel their heart moving in their rib cage. They start palpating, and the point is that they will go into that and they will come out. Nervousness, these are some of the symptoms. Excessive fear, worrying, nail biting. Here are some of the factors affecting women, and this is something I want to tell you. It's very, very important to know. So I was telling you that what my life was. Part of the dysfunctionality was that I was left in multiple homes, and I'm a survivor of sexual abuse by 3 different people from the age of 6 to the age of 16. 53% of India's population are survivors of sexual abuse. Now, we always think it's an outsider. The Department of Mother and Child in Delhi did a study over 12 states, sampling 13,247 people, and this was the data that they got. And 95% of abuse, sexual abuse, takes place from within family. One out of every 3rd girl child is a survivor. This is one of the leading causes of mental health issues. It's not about being clinically mental health. You don't have to have depression. But what happens with survivors of abuse is they can't maintain relationships. They have extremely low self-esteem. They can't sleep. They're inconsistent. And all this you don't see as children. You see it in adult life. These are some of the things that really affect us, our mental health. Another thing in this country that we don't look at is discrimination. violence, unemployment are gender roles. But I want you to look at the other thing which some of us do. In India, the caregivers are never given a break. If you have an ailing person and there's a caregiver in the house, everybody only takes care of the ailing person. Yes, they need to be taken care. It's very important, but the caregiver needs care. They need breaks. They need to get out of that, otherwise they will have breakdowns. This is simple. How many of us do it and feel tired? How many of us feel irritated? How many of us feel fed up? We feel betrayed. We feel that we've been taken for granted. That's because caregivers are not being given attention. And in our country, women are the primary caregivers. Separation. One of the common things I hear from women who are separated is, I've lost my husband, but I've also lost all my friends, because now my friends are scared that if I go to their house, their husband will be attracted to me because I'm available. It is a common theme. This is reality. This is what they all say. They've not just lost their husbands, they've lost their friends. And it's not a myth. So separation, while they may need to separate for whatever reason, it has other impacts on them. Violence or abuse. We talked about sexual violence, but there can be violence as verbal violence, physical violence. Okay? These are all forms of violence. Eating disorders. When I came here this evening, I was thinking that I need to share this because it's the truth. One young lady came to me and said, "You're not looking like what you looked in your pictures, you look much more chubby." I said, "Yeah." And I know she was not being offensive, she was saying the truth. And the truth is that yes, I was chubby. And the reality is, I know when I'm getting stressed, because when I'm stressed, I start eating. And I eat junk food. So I have particular food. I have no desire for sweets. I like salted, fried foods. And the moment I start losing weight, then it's an indicator that I've started managing my stress. There are people who do chocolates. So each one has some favorite. Overeating is a sign. Is food important? I was watching that, yes, because food affects mood. That's the slogan you need to remember. Food affects mood. Okay. Gender and sexual identity. Yes, this is now something that's a bad word in this country, but it's also the reality. Postpartum depression and postpartum menopause. These are all things that are so important but impact our mental health and we don't take care. And I'm now going to tell you the story of Dobara Pucho. In 2014, when Deepika fell ill, so she woke up in the morning. She would just didn't want to open her eyes, she would say. She was high functioning, she would be shooting. And it took her 2 months to be convinced that she needed help. And then after her recovery of her episode, when she started reading, she realized the stigma associated with it. And that's when she decided that I'm going to use my role as an influencer to influence society to break the stigma in mental health. And there's a story behind Dobara Pucho. So we were trying to do a campaign to break stigma. And we're sitting in McCann, and the creatives are trying to design what is depression, what is mental health. There were 12 people in the room. One person suddenly said, I understand it, I've had an episode. The moment one person said it, the others started. Out of 12 of us in the room, 9 had had episodes. And that's how we started Dobara Pucho. Why did we say Dobara Pucho? 2 years ago, I was called to an Indian Institute of Management because there was a suicide. When I went there, I was really pained. The story is, there's a young man who had slowly not been coming for his meals. He's not been attending class. Nobody, not even his classmates, nobody noticed that he was missing. They found out because one day the stench from the corridor of the room was so bad. When they broke open, it was 3 to 4 days since he had done his. And that's why we say Dobara Pucho. Now why Dobara Pucho? Very often we see somebody and we look at them and something tells us they're not okay. And we say, how are you? And they say, I'm okay. And we say, okay. And we walk away. Yet we feel that I'm okay is not making sense. So we encourage you to ask again. Dobara Pucho, are you okay? That are you okay the second time really helps a person know that you're paying attention. So after she came out, we tried to get real life stories of people who had had depression. Nobody would share their stories. We managed to get 6 people who had the guts. And these are these people who've had episodes of depression and who live normal, functioning lives. So we did the Dobara Pucho movie, which went viral. We did this campaign, and we talked to you, and today I talked to you about Deepika, who is an influencer. But I don't think just Deepika is an influencer. I think each of us are. Each of us has a circle of influence. It may not be in big numbers, but we do have a circle of influence. And if we begin the journey of influencing our circle to accept and others who have emotional or mental health issues, then we begin, as you all are saying, begin helping people to find their unlimited self. You know, when I thought, okay, this is the unlimited self, because let me tell you, when you help a person find their self, they will rise much more than we ever thought. For a teacher, it is so valuable to have the 30%er get 50% than the 80%er get 90%. This is what the role of an influencer is. And I assure you that each of you are influencers. You do not have to be a Deepika. So when we finished this is when I actually came out with the book, Battles in the Mind, where in the book I've shared my absolute story, and I've also shared in the book every psychological tool that I used using layman's language to help you overcome crisis. Now, why did I do that story? Why did I share my story in public? Because, again, to break a myth. There is a feeling that all of us mental health professionals and doctors, we are different or we are superior. We are not. We have the same stories as you. We are not any different from any of you. We are just the same. So the power of influence and the power of stories is when you see this and you see our data. We had only, in 2014, there were only so many discussions in India in the press, 3,777. By 2015, we had reached 6,133. And 2016, we are 8,236. Because of her, she was able to do one thing that none of us could, and that was, in the pinnacle of her career, she was able to share her vulnerability to the world. And she was willing to share her vulnerability to the world because, as she said, if by my story one person can be helped, I've done my job. So this was some of the data that we have to show you the power of sharing, the power of being vulnerable, and the power of each of us roles as influencers. We are influencers. We do not need to be celebrities. We have a circle of influence. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's two people, but we are influencers. Here are some of the questions I get frequently. I'm a relatively happy person, have a comfortable life. Can I develop depression? Sure you can. I would get phone calls after she came out in public saying, she's beautiful, she's got a lot of money, why would she get depression? Depression is an illness. Okay? Are mental illnesses genetic? Will I pass it on to my kids? Yes, it is genetic. But then let me also tell you, every disease now is passed on through genes. Okay? Depression, diabetes is, cancer is, skin problem is, so everything is genetic. Is medication necessary for mental illness necessary? If you are I want to just explain to you so that you know it. If you're in the reacting stage and if you've reached up to, if you're moving towards injured, then you can do counseling and therapy and manage it. If you've not taken help when you're injured, then you will need, it will become a disorder and you will need help. Any questions to that? Okay, so let me end by telling you something about the power of vulnerability. The paradox about vulnerability is that we are discouraged from being vulnerable, yet it is vulnerability that is the basis to build community, to build individuals, to build the uniqueness in us, to maximize our potential, to accept ourselves. We need to be vulnerable. And yet, once the infant, by the time the infant is 2 and 3, we start training them and discouraging them from being vulnerable. Does that make sense? What do we do in play schools? It takes strength to be vulnerable. Because you're vulnerable, you have to face shame and you may have to face humiliation. When my book came out, I received hate mail from extended family members that I was sharing the story. But the fact is, the story was not shared to hurt anybody. The story was shared to educate and promote people who feel hopeless to have hope. Because I sincerely believe that if I can be where I am today, anybody else can. The Anna 30 years ago would not answer a question in college, even if I knew the answer, because I was scared. I would have had a heart attack if I had to address an audience. I would have been having panic attacks. I share this because I think each of you has unlimited potential. Tap it. By that, I'm not saying go home and fight. You know, very often I have people saying, I went home and told my husband that, I told my uncle this. That's not what it is. I'm only saying acknowledge your vulnerability. You owe that to yourself. You deserve that. You deserve to respect yourself, whatever your journey has been. If you do not respect yourself, you will never respect another human. And then we'll bring in our favorite word. I'm doing it out of duty. And to me, when I hear that, I just think, what is the resentment in this person to say this? I'm not doing it out of free will, I'm doing it out of duty. So I end my talk saying, tap your potential, acknowledge your demons, and take help if you need it. There is nothing wrong. Okay, thank you. Do they want to do Q&A? Yeah. So do you want to have some questions?
Yeah, we'll take the questions.
Yeah. I would like to invite Ms. Meenal Jain to join Ms. Anna, the question and answer.
Can I just get that bottle of water? This one. Anyone is there?
Questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just give it.
The house is open for questions. You can ask.
Good evening, ma'am. Wonderful listening to you. I have two questions, ma'am. The first thing is, normally or usually we have some bad memory. And the more you want to delete it, the more it comes to the surface. So I just want you to help out how we can get out of it.
Okay. So here's something that you may or may not know. I'll stand when I answer. The first 7 years of a child's life is the most important. And I want to just tell you all something. I may break one more fantasy of yours. The first 7 years in a child's life is what we call when your psychological template is formed, what we call script. The rest of our lives, we are only playing that out. So when you talk about memories, yes, the more you try to block the memory, the more it will surface. And very often when you don't deal with it, it will show up as psychosomatic illness. To erase memory or to heal, the best example I will tell you is if you have a wound, there are two ways you can heal it. What happens when you have a wound and you just put plaster on it? It starts festering. If you leave it open and let the sunlight come, even the scarring is slow, but you recover. So yes, some of us have bad memories which we try to block. It's not possible to block because I will show you data that intellect can block, body cell doesn't block. So the memory can be triggered by sound, sight. The worst memory I want to tell you is smell. People who've had trauma and the traumas associated with smell, they re-experience that trauma. Because Sense, the smell is the only sense that the brain can't edit. So it's important to work through this. I would encourage people who have scars or who have memories to actually, there are exercises for healing, which if you take professional help, they will teach you. And you can recover. But do not block it, because it will show up as an illness, a physical illness.
Ma'am, one more question. We normally have a lot of mood swings in life. So how do we deal about this?
Okay. So first I'm going to tell you, when we hear mood swings, we are women. Most often from all the male we'll hear that, oh, you're PMSing or you're that or this. Okay, that's again, yes, some people have moods, because of hormonal imbalance. The mood swings are, see, I want to tell you something that none of us do. Our bodies talk to us. And we are so busy only with our intellect that we don't pay attention to our body. If we pay attention to our body, the mood swing is because the body is telling you there is something to address.
Next question.
I have a question. How do you come to know if a child is depressed? Like, what are the symptoms to know if a child is going through any kind of depression or something he or she doesn't want to share?
Okay. So the typical symptoms when something is going on with children, one thing is, depending on their age, they may not be able to articulate. There's an inability because they may not have the right words or to be able to articulate. Very common is they may not want to go to school. They will show physical symptoms, but a lot of them will chronic stomachache or headache. Okay, a lot of them when they're younger, they'll say stomach is paining. Or this nail biting, and you'll also see them withdrawing. The best way and to get little children, especially less than 10 years to toddlers, is actually what we do is we make them express themselves through play. And the children, through play and through what we call play work, they will actually share the story of what's happening. The other thing which I want to again tell you, especially in any form of sexual abuse, children never lie. When we teach this to little children, we teach them something called the touch. What does that mean? It means, and all of us know it, even when somebody touches us when we are children, and it's different from being affectionate. There's a flash in our brain, even as a child, if it says, something's odd. So we actually teach children the touch. Now, a lot of children do not share with parents because they themselves are confused as to what is happening. So it's very important, whatever the child is sharing with you, not to dismiss it, to let them share whatever. But play, drawing is the best way to let children express themselves. They can't articulate otherwise.
And what about the teenagers?
Teenagers will become rebellious. Okay? They will actually share a lot of stuff, what we call in a dual way, which means they will say something and they're watching you to test are you buying it, and they'll say, no, that was not happened. So they're trying to actually see if you're judging them. Teenagers will also, and it's very natural, very often they will share more with their peers. Okay? Now, one of the issues in India about saying that, oh, there's a counselor, why aren't they sharing the whatever with the counselor? In India, in my experience, in a lot of schools, CBSE schools, there's a mandatory requirement that there's a counselor. But in a lot of schools, that poor counselor is doing multiple roles. So then children don't trust them. If you're, replacement teacher, one day you're the maths teacher, then you're the counselor, then you're the English teacher. When the English teacher doesn't, children get confused. Then going to a counselor, they need to feel very safe in sharing what they are. So rebellion is a big sign. Even some of us adults who rebel, we need to question, who are we rebelling against? It's some issue that we've had as a child, even in adulthood, that is playing out, that we rebel against stuff.
So you mean by this saying that counseling is necessary for them? Is it so?
No, I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm saying counseling is healthy. Okay? But the counselor, because the counselor, let me tell you what the counselor does. The counselor provides a space which is non-judgmental and which actually the counselor starts probing, and they probe in a very subtle way. So it is absolutely essential that when somebody is going through something, that they get professional help. Yes? Yeah?
I would like to ask, is finger sucking and thumb sucking, I mean, what does it kind of show? Is it lack of something which makes the children do that?
Anything to do with the mouth is security. So, as adults, eating, smoking, drinking is all to do with security. Now, what does that mean? It means that when the baby was born, when the baby is being breastfed, one, it's getting nourishment. The other thing is that is the time that the baby is feeling secure in its world with the mother. So thumb sucking, it's not that, again, I think what we need to remember is when a child, if it's the infant thumb sucking, it is natural and it goes past. We need to be alert if somebody is engaging, a child or an adult is engaging in an activity or has a habit which is not age appropriate. You know? But then I also want to tell you that I hear these horrible stories where the child is at 3 years old sucking the thumb, so the mother has put chili powder around the thumb. This is not the way to stop habits. You know, it's traumatic.
But then what do you do if the child is around 8 or 9 years old?
If the child is 8 or 9 years old and is still sucking the thumb, that child is trying to express something, and it's for those kind of children that play therapy is very good.
What is the therapy's name, you said?
Play therapy.
There was one question from Vandana. Okay, you want to ask a question?
Yeah.
Anna, I want to check, you've talked about depression and all of the other stuff, but we're generally concerned about day-to-day stress levels and how to deal with it, which is not really depressing, but we have, I think all of us are working and there is a lot of stress that's involved.
So can you give me an example of a day-to-day stress?
Time management is a stress, then health issues, fitness, managing children, family, all of that. So there is a lot going on in the at mental level, physical level, health. So how do you manage that in general?
Okay. So let me tell you something from what I'm hearing. That is a syndrome with us, including me, and that is we are trying to be perfect women. And you have only X amount of psychological energy. You cannot draw psychological energy from the environment. No amount of your husband's love or your mother-in-law's love or less shouting will change that. That is inherent. If you're a working woman, we have to make choices about how much time am I going to spend in work. Who is going to look after my children then? This is about that. We can't be all over the place. If you pay attention to every successful woman, they will always tell you they had to give up something. Because we can't do everything. And at different times of our lives, life stages, when I say, for example, a young woman, middle-aged woman, older woman, we need to keep prioritizing according to our stage of our life. And those are, it's bound to happen, happens to me too. We need to do that. We cannot do that because you need to remember that only that much is possible.
There's one more question. How do I build an aura inside of me that no negativity can creep in? This is asked by Vandana.
Aura inside. Okay. That is, you want to feel good inside.
How do you build an aura inside so that no negativity is absorbed?
Okay. So here's the next. You will absorb negativity. Let me give you a good example. It's a great day. You're having a lovely time. The day's been really good. And then you go and sit with somebody who tells you the story of their life. How do you feel when you exit? You feel tired or you feel happy? Because here is another fundamental thing that we forget. All human beings, we are only forces of energy. And when we come together, there will be an exchange of energy. For example, all of us sitting here today, there is some energy of each other. It doesn't mean that you've taken the energy of the person next to you. There is some energy that we've absorbed. So we can't, build a fort around ourselves. What I would be concerned is your need to build a fort. Because rigidity is the first, most wonderful way to get mentally depressed. And especially, let me tell you, for example, those who have a high need for perfection. Okay? This has to be in line, that has to be straight. They can't. People who are like this, who are high perfectionists, what they're symbolizing is externally they're trying to control because internally things are out of control.
I have a small question here. So sometimes when you're brought up in a very protective environment, you don't get street smart. And when you come out there to the world scenario, you get into depression as you're not able to solve and cope up with the world outside. So how to deal with that kind of depression?
It's a very important question that you asked. And I want all of you to pay attention, especially young mothers. Abandonment is the same as engulfment, which means some of us think by engulfing, which is overprotecting our children, they are doing wonderful. It's the same, it's just two sides of the coin. Now when I say that, some of us are called helicopter parents. What does a helicopter do? It never flies at high altitude. It's there hovering. But when you're hovering like this, what you're actually psychologically conveying to your little child is you're incapable. Because between the age of 2 to 4 is what we call psychological, stages of development. The child, if you remember, your child, will put its finger in the plug point, will do something, taste something. They are exploring the environment. And when you're overprotective and over-controlling, that whole stage they've missed out. So in adult life, they will not make decisions because they're scared they'll make a mistake. Okay? They will not take risks, so they find it difficult to succeed at work. They have an inability to think for themselves because nobody has let them do that. Somebody has thought for them. So, when I hear people, and especially nowadays, I hear all parenting where there's this overdose. You know, all the time, your children are going on play dates. Children need to be bored too. Because when they are bored and by themselves, they will create games. They will do some fantasy. Instead of that, we will book Monday to Friday because we want to be 4 to 6, that play date something. So these are things that are very important. So please remember, abandonment and engulfment are just two sides of the coin. In fact, we call that marshmallowing. You know marshmallows? They're that cut like jelly. Children need boundaries because boundaries give them safety. They know, okay, if I step here, I'm going to get a whack or I'm going to get shouted. But if you say, no, you do anything you want, they don't know where they belong.
Ma'am, can I just start? Do we have the owner of Honda City RJ14CZ3161 here? No. Actually, it's been parked wrongly, and we have to remove it. Remove that car from the current place. Ma'am, do you own that? Excuse me, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, there's one more question. Is depression a chemical inadequacy, emotional imbalance, or a state of mind? How will one know if he or she is in depression?
Okay.
This was by Surabhi.
Clinical depression is a chemical imbalance. Just like you have a heart attack, the brain has had a brain attack. It is overworked, it wants rest, and because it's overworked, it's not able to secrete adequate hormones, specifically endorphin and serotonin. If you say that on your day-to-day English language, I'm depressed, that means something is amiss. You're not clinically depressed. How will you know if you're clinically depressed? There's a very quick evaluation that the answers, it's on our website. You can finish it in 3 minutes. And it's just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And it will indicate that you need to go for professional help. Now, depression as an illness, when I'm feeling depressed, if I don't, that's the sign that the brain has started feeling tired. And if I've not addressed it, and I continue to go in that journey, then the brain will have the brain attack. Yeah?
Anna, Minal, I want to ask a question. For physical health, we have fitness and food, the right diet. How can one improve the mental health?
Okay. Food affects mood, so it's important. Physical activity is extremely important, especially some form of physical activity, even if it means walking, because endorphins are released. The other now is meditation. Now, meditation doesn't mean that everybody has to, do meditation to reach another level. It's actually basically a few minutes of quiet time going internally. Now, by the way, for all of you, there is a company that's formed, we are into the app world, right? So there's a company called CureFit, and they've created an app, a 10-minute or 5-minute meditative app. You can do that. And I want to tell you, for mindfulness, there are books now to concentrate. Mindfulness books, which you actually can, like worksheets. It's more about an activity. It's a kind of, it's not really doodling, but a kind of doodling. Yeah?
Any more questions? You want to continue? I have a list of 10-15 questions.
Okay. You have a question?
Ma'am, even if I have a good night's sleep, I'll sleep for the whole day if I get time. Is something wrong with me? I'm sleeping a lot. I saw those symptoms in your list and I thought I'm sleeping a lot, so I should ask this.
Is it because you have nothing to do?
Yes, ma'am. No, but I want to know, is there something wrong with me? Because, if I sleep for the whole night, if I get time, I'll sleep and I'll not feel like I don't want to sleep. I would want to sleep.
So I'm hearing two things. First of all, I really appreciate you for being so authentic in such a large group. Really well done. If you're sleeping because of boredom, then I think what you need to work, so let me tell you something. I wish I could have taught you all this, I don't have paper. There are 3 things that drive us. We need, but it's too small. We are driven if we are recognized. When I say recognized, if we feel good, whatever activity we are engaging. Or we are driven because we need stimulation. Or we are driven because we need some form of structure. Somewhere, my sense is that maybe you would like to look at those 3. I'm picking up something, but I think this is a large audience for me to share what I'm picking up. So I would ask you to just draw a triangle, put structure, draw an equilateral triangle, put structure, put stimulation, and put recognition. And intuitively just draw a circle around what you feel you're drawn to. I feel that you're giving a message by sleeping the whole day, and you're smiling. So the people who need to see you sleeping the whole day, I hope they're seeing it. Yeah, circle it, you'll find it. But well done, you really got.
Any more questions?
Ma'am, small issues like, as you said, eating disorders and the nail biting. So how do we know how severe it is? Like, it's a day-to-day thing. We keep changing our, the eating habits keep changing. Sometimes we feel like eating junk.
That's okay.
So how do we know when is it
when anything
a
becomes
concern?
obsessive, then you need to flag it. Anything becomes obsessive.
Ma'am, what is emotional intimacy?
Excellent question. Excellent question. What is emotional intimacy? Emotional intimacy is when you're able to relate to another individual completely naked. When I say naked, not physically naked, psychologically naked. That means you're willing to bear yourself with the good parts and the shadow parts. I don't call them bad parts. I call them shadows, the sun and the shadow. Okay? Actually, again, I may break another fantasy. When you do my job, you'll realize that there are only 2 or 3 people we actually have psychological intimacy with. All the rest that we do, even though we may be saying, I love you, hug you, kiss you, whatever, it is pseudo-intimacy. Because it's very difficult for all of us. It takes a lot of courage to expose ourselves psychologically. Yeah? But it's a very important question. Yeah. Yeah?
Any more questions?
No, I didn't hear it.
Please give her mic.
How do you deal with the emotional intimacy if it is not with your spouse or lover or general notions of emotional intimacy, and it keeps on bothering you? I mean, like you said, it's only with a few people, and it is, of course, there in your mind. How do you deal with it?
So again, that's a confusion because we associate intimacy with sexual intimacy. Okay, so we have to separate that. So when we are when I say what she said, emotional intimacy or psychological intimacy, we have the ability in us to be completely raw. And how do I deal if it's somebody other than who I'm supposed to? Well, I think that it depends on how that is processed. And when I say processed, in terms of how you would convey this to the people who are part of your inner circle. Okay. I would have answered you more directly if it's a one-on-one question, because this is a large audience and I do not want judgment. But what I'm trying to say is that in emotional intimacy, it's very rare that we can actually find somebody that who we feel doesn't judge us and we can be raw. Because people are judgmental. And it's a journey of learning to every day. You have to learn how to be non-judgmental.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Is there a question behind? Any more questions? Do you want me to ask a question? Do you want to continue? There's one.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Neha. Well, I wanted to ask, when you know someone who needs a professional help, but the patient itself is not agreed to go for a help, what the family can do in that case?
Okay, so that's again an important question. One of the issues with mental health or mental illness is the patient never has insight into their illness. Others can see it. So in the initial stage, if the person who needs the help is unwilling to take help, then the family needs to take help how to first learn to deal with that. For example, in the way I practice is that when I see an individual, I also see members of the family. Yeah?
But what is happening if family is already met to a counselor and the doctors, and they have started with the medication, but still the patient is not agree? And if the patient is in acute stage?
Okay. So here's something that you need to know. If you have any form of mental illness, first of all, the medication will kick in only after, when I say kick in, it starts taking effect only after 6 to 8 weeks.
All right.
We're talking almost 2 months. The second thing is, it will not just go. It will be very gradual. It will take a minimum of over a year. Okay? Number 3, the earlier the person has visited, if it's any mental illness, the earlier they address it, the quicker the recovery. If it's acute, that means it's been there for some time, so the recovery is also going to take much, much longer. It will not happen just like that. So the tablets also have to be calibrated.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Any other questions?
Okay. Okay.
It is generally said that no man can govern another man till it has the consent of the other. But we never give consent to be governed.
We never
give consent to the other person to govern us.
To?
Govern us. It's about governance.
Yeah, but governance is always about self, right?
It is all about self. At times you get governed by others. But is being rebellious the only solution to it? Or can we find any other way out? I'm talking both about the professional and personal life.
I think, see, rebellion is not going to work in the long term. I think we are rebelling in whatever way, whether you're rebelling at work or rebelling in your personal life, there is something that you disagree with and it's going against your values. I think it's much more important to enter into dialogue and understand the space where that person is coming and where you're coming from. Because rebellion is actually, let me tell you, if it's at work, it's very negative, it impacts your career. If it's at home, they write you off saying this is one rebellious girl. So I think these are things that we have to learn to work through. And that is why I always say dialogue is very important. You need to learn how to dialogue and talk through these things.
At times these dialogues do not work. What next?
The dialogues do not work. Let me tell you why. Because of the position we take when we are dialoguing. The dialogue is reactive and not responsive. For example, if you start sentences with, you did this to me, or you said this, so I feel that, the person has already got on the defensive. If you say, I am experiencing this when this happened, then you're allowing them to talk. In other words, you're opening the door a little for the rat to escape. If you get into these things when you're blaming, people will become defensive. And in a career, you will be marred because they will mark you there.
How to handle this situation? We're talking all about the depression, the hyperactive mind, and can't say it's a violence or something, but the personality is very, very hyper. And don't we think so? Okay, this is also depression is a person get low.
Ma'am, yeah, from what you said, I want to tell you. Women show depression as forms of sadness. Men show depression as hyperactivity, anger, workaholics, okay, risky behavior, and different forms of substance. Because you need to know something, stereotypically, culturally, men are not supposed to feel sad. So, whatever is going on, it always comes out as anger. And that's anger is a clear sign among men, they're depressed.
I have a question. Suppose I have a friend whom I know is already going to a counselor, but still she's talking to me, sharing her things with me. And then she's asking me, do you think everything is all right with me? So what am I supposed to say? I know she's going to a counselor and still she's asking me this thing.
I'm picking up that she's not really, the counselor and she are not really connecting. If I was you, I would ask her, would you like to really explore if you and your counselor are working out okay? And if it's not, would you like to change your counselor?
What should I answer her? Like if she asks me if
That's
everything
the
is all
question.
right.
When you put that question, you will make her think that she's feeling dissatisfied with what's happening there. So she's asking you because there is something that she wants that she's not getting. So the best thing is to put a question to her. You don't give the answer. Say, okay, you're telling me you're going to A. What is going on there that's not making you feel satisfied?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can direct it to Anna.
I wanted to ask a last question. Is it last question? Yeah. This is a situation, Anna. How will you rate it? Like you can see that there are audience 50%. They got up and went. They know that the event is for 2 hours.
They were high tea.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because they're not in the hall. And they know that the event is for 2 hours. With this situation, I am feeling bad. Like sometimes I feel like, I should do something, which is really not nice. So who needs treatment? Me or them?
I don't think either need. Let's look at this in perspective. I've seen some of them going, but I don't see it's because of you or of the talk or something. Let's be honest. We are women in India. Our priority is that I have to run when my husband is coming home, or I left my children with somebody for 2 hours or 1 hour, some arrangement is made. So if I have to make a choice, I would rather displease this audience and Vicky than rock my boat at home. No, so what maybe if I would look at this difference, I can understand from your perspective, you've arranged tea and there's a thing. So maybe that you do that differently so that that part is taken care. Because you know what, we face this all the time. I train people, right? I'm training professionals. We work on Saturday and Sunday. They pay the money for their training. They won't show up because husband said yes, see movie. That's their reality. Okay? And, you know, when you reach my stage, you'll also know one thing. People like me threaten men. Because they're thinking these people are going and learning with this lady. She's one independent thing. What is going to happen in my house? So I have men like that who actually come and, you know, my job is so nice because I have husbands visiting me to check me out. I have, when the husband is seeing me, wives to check out what is this, what kind of woman is this, man is going there. So, you know, you have to understand the context. And to me, they were running because, you know, so while I talk to you, I'm observing. They were picking the car keys. So there's agitation already. They probably have some commitments.
You should appreciate all those who wanted to ask questions, they have stayed back. And that is 50%. And that is really appreciable.
Maybe change your timings for tea.
Ma'am, one last question about the question.
I'll tell you something. You must, at the end of the day, just believe one thing. In your mind, if you've done a good job, that's all that's important.
Well said, well said.
Who has a question? The question I asked, ma'am, that was for the present, that we should treat our kids not under the boundaries and everything. But I wanted to know as well that what to do with the people who are already victims of the kind of situation which I just told you.
I think you have to work with them on their self-esteem.
Okay. So we start building that again?
Yeah.
Even if they are 30, 40 years now? I mean, the victims to this problem which I just told you. The protected ones.
I'm 54 years old.
Helicopters,
Every night, now when I sit in the plane, I will evaluate. I'm going back, right? I will evaluate and I will say the things to myself aloud in the plane. I don't care if people think I'm nuts, that I've done a great job. I've done well. We all need it. And again, if you don't do it to yourself, if you don't say I love you to yourself, but you expect your partner to say I love you, how much they say you'll be dissatisfied, that person feels tired and says any amount not good for this one. Might as well shut up.
So to keep...
Self-esteem has to be worked throughout your life.
I'm not talking about self-esteem, I'm talking about some other victim of this problem. How do we boost it back?
Self-esteem. Let me tell you what self-esteem is. We use the word. Self-esteem is our sense of adequacy, psychological adequacy. And if we don't have psychological adequacy, I can be the chairman of a company and still feel not so good. Okay? So when we talk about adequacy, there's another thing we need to remember. See, these are all what we call psychological stances, and it is in our unaware. Okay, I'll give you. So we have psychological stances. I'll give you another example between poverty and abundance. There are people who can have 1,000 crores in their bank, but they still feel poor. There will be somebody else who has 10 rupees and they feel rich, because psychological adequacy is abundance. So these are things we are not taught. In fact, when you do counseling, you learn that. Now, people who are aggressive, we think they are smart. Poor things, they are attacking because they feel inadequate.
Yeah, actually. So to keep ourselves away from negativity, ma'am, to keep ourselves away from negativity is ignore the solution.
No. I'm hearing something else, and I'm going to tell you from the mysterious question. What you're saying is to keep yourself from hooking a bait for a mind game. So that when people bait you, you can ignore the bait. Okay? Or you can, that is negativity. Okay, what is negativity? Anytime you're a rescuer, you're a persecutor, or you feel victimized, it's negativity. all of us who jump to help others, we think we are very wonderful people. That's not true. These are all positions, psychological positions. So when I say to keep away from negativity, ignoring the negativity may not work. You will need to understand what is the negativity causing you.
So for that, should we ignore them
When-
or ignore the situation? Yeah.
Empathize with them, but do not let that affect you. Don't feel bad later on for hours together. Okay, this thing has happened.
Ma'am,
That was the question.
that I think I'm going to be very honest. See, these are all fantasies. We are all human beings, okay? We do get impacted by others' negativity. What is important, we can't ignore it. What we need to do is how we manage it. When we say we understand them, we understand what is happening to them. But I'll give you an example. I've had a bad day, okay? And that's my business. You come in my path and I give you one whack. And you understand that, oh, she's had a bad day. You take the whack or you ignore the whack. The next day when I do the same thing, will you do that? No. That's negativity. So you need to understand, yes, A is having negativity or they're causing something. While I understand what's happening to them, I need to also know what is it doing to me. It's not easy for us to be compassionate to somebody who's hurting us. We are putting unrealistic demands on ourselves. That's one option. Or the other option is to dialogue with them.
That is what the question is. Should we ignore them or ignore the situation or just have distance with them?
Okay.
Sometimes it's not possible also. That person or that situation is again and again coming. That person is with you, always around.
Ma'am, sometimes these negativities are within from our close circle.
Yeah.
You're asking me a question to say, should you ignore somebody in a close circle? Now, that is something that you have to choose.
Exactly.
I, as a therapist, am not going to tell you, since our favorites always, in any story in India, our favorite is the mother-in-law. Okay. Now, okay, but if she's giving you a hard time and you go to a therapist and say, she's giving me a lot of negativity, will the therapist tell you ignore her? You will go home and tell your husband the therapist said to ignore her. It's not going to work. I think every issue that we face, we have to look at it in its unique context and we have to make decisions that we are willing to face. It's like telling somebody to leave their marriage. You may think it's terrible, they may need to leave, but the final decision of that, they have to do because they have to face those consequences.
So communicate?
I think, when we talk about it, we talk about how you can engage with this person and there are different ways you can actually convey, I don't say, convey that this is not going well.
What happens is 10 old issues crop into your, somehow into your mouth, they come out, and then that creates all the more chaos.
Actually communication effective communication is a learned skill and we teach it because again you need to remember something, I'm giving you data. When we communicate, only 3% is verbal. 97% is non-verbal. So, if it is this person who you want to communicate, and I'm going to act it out for you. Okay? So, if you go in front of this person and say, I want to talk to you.
Agreed. You don't know where it will end now.
Okay? Not going to happen. So, when we're learning this, we are actually learning, we teach you what is happening in your body that is actually communicating the negativeness.
The question is, you actually don't want to mingle those issues, but then somehow that reaction is so spontaneous.
Do a session on conflict management.
Thanks, Meenal.
You'll be, actually doing family work is very interesting. And I was telling Minal this morning when she met me, I have a lot of them. And I actually have a lot of stories, and it's very interesting. First I'll see the father, then I'll see the son, then I'll see the wife, the mother-in-law. So they come in groups. And each one, the same story, they have a different version and different interpretation. Okay? The same story. So when communication is like that, when everybody is able to sit and actually talk the same story and understand it from its perspective.
I think let's...
Thank you, Anna.
A big round of applause for this power pack and stimulating session. I would like to invite Ms. Meenal Jean to join Ms. Anna, and please present a memento.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Very lovely time, yeah?
I extend a heartfelt thank you to our speaker, Ms. Anna Chandy, for an enlightening and awakening session. We are indeed inspired, ma'am. Now I would request past chairperson and committee members to come on the dais for a group picture.
Yes.